Good evening, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the budget calendar, Barry's favorite topic.
As Councilwoman Hamrick stated, is my favorite 12 months of the year. It's ever revolving consistently. Last year we first presented this budget calendar, so just revised it and updated it for our fiscal year 2027 budget. It is included in the packet, but also did put a printout on your desk there. It just outlines every step of the way, kind of the things we do internally, and then these steps council will be needed throughout the entire process. So right now we're meeting with department heads and giving them a refresher training on how to get all their budgets into the software, things like that. They'll move into March by entering their budgets in the software. April, May, we'll start revise those requests from department heads, present drafts to council throughout the year. As of right now, our revenue neutral rate hearing and everything like that will be scheduled for September 1st. This year is a little different to where both of our meetings of September are before the 20th, which is the deadline to pass it. So if anything happens to where we can't get it done on September 1st, we also have September 15th as a fallback if the schedule gets out of whack or we need an extra meeting for something. So I'd just like to put that in there for you guys to review. If you have any questions, please let me know. But that's really all it for the budget calendar.
Just be aware that there's some things going on in the legislature that might change those dates, but hopefully we'll know those sooner than later if they do.
Much sooner.
Yeah.
Later for those.
I might kick things off for the CIP presentation. Before I guess I turn it over to Barry, I'd like to acknowledge some of the history and progress we've made. Looking at the past, sure the project was discussed much earlier, but I pulled up an old PowerPoint and found we seriously been talking about the new public works facility probably before 2022, but this is kind of how the old way Bel Aire used to do it. We'd throw projects up. 53rd Street was crumbling. We put that as our top priority and completed that project. 45th Street was and still is needing reconstruction. That project will be let in late 2026, early 2027. We wanted to refresh existing parks, so we set the priority and improved Eagle Lake and Recreation Center Park is being updated as we speak. We wanted to build new parks. I have a bid set for a new $500,000 park ready to be approved by council on my desk. Bel Aire was put into a unique situation, we discussed with purchasing the land to make way for future growth. On one side, strained our budget. On the other side, it allowed us to grow the way we're growing today. I joined Bel Aire in 2016. At that time, the council really scraped together $300,000 to improve just our local streets. And believe it or not, that was a big win. Today, it has grown to about $1 million a year we do in street maintenance program. The land debt is retiring in 2024, and our city is growing at a record pace. Like most things we've touched in the last few years, we need to change. Not only our processes, but our mindset from, we're just a small city. Let's find a way to do this, but we are a city. Let's set a plan and put it into action. Don't want to make light of what we've done in the past, but I think Barry is going to present something that is a little more than what we've done in the past and allow our vision for this community to be fulfilled through our CIP plan, not only our expenditures, but elsewhere. So I just wanted to kind of recap, as usually we just throw some things up on the board and hopefully we can scrape the money with cash or which way we go. But Bel Aire is really moving from that small city to a mid-sized city. And this is kind of the first step and a good step in the way that we can utilize our comp plan and other master plans into this process. So Barry, take us away. I just wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Just one minor correction. I think you made a misstatement. You said that land debt is retired in 2024 and it's actually 2034.
34. Thank you. Got tongue tied there. Can't come soon enough.
Wish we could do it, but unfortunately.
All right. so we'll just jump in. Tonight, what we're kind of really looking for is some input from the council in these specific areas. When it comes to what criteria do we want to involve when it comes to project selection, how we utilize that criteria, how we create those scoring mechanisms for these projects. The comp plan will be a huge component of this. As you know, a big part of local government is the community engagement aspect of that. We utilize that community engagement through all of our master planning sessions, and then that brings in and comes into play when we talk about the capital improvement plan. So we don't have to stand up here and educate and get public input on all this stuff right now. We've gathered it already. We're taking all that into consideration when we're moving forward with these projects. Also, when we're identifying projects, how involved do we want to use those master plans that we already have, like the water sewer master plan, bike ped plan, parks master plan, and any kind of other criteria that council wants to include in those project evaluations. We'll also talk about the funding mechanisms, and we'll need some input on how we want to utilize our cash, how we want to utilize debt and debt management, general obligation bonds, things like that, and as well as alternative revenue sources such as sales tax. So I just put in here a refresher of the comp plan value statements. I know we've been over these several times with the past meetings, but it's just good to keep those in front of mind as we go through this presentation. Our value statements from the plan include economic development, transportation items, parks and rec, our community identity and character, growth and investment, and of course, housing. So whenever we're bringing these projects together, these are kind of the value statements and goals that will be attached to these projects that will get them higher on the priority list. So what is a CIP? It's essentially just a multi-year financial and planning document, and it schedules these major projects, infrastructure, to support our long-term goals, which have now been established within the comp plan. It helps us plan ahead instead of reacting, be proactive instead of reactive, prioritize limited funding. We have several departments that are always coming to us with specific projects or needs. This helps prioritize those into what needs to come first, second, third, fourth. Coordinate projects across departments. The CIP plan helps us really outline and lay out those projects over time. So when we're doing one project, we're not going to come right back behind it and tear it up just to do another project, right? So if we're doing our street maintenance plan, we don't want to have that happen and then a water line replacement come in after that and potentially ruin the street. So it coordinates all of our plannings together, our streets plan, our water replacement plan, sewer plans, and the CIP plan all together. It helps us tie the spending to the comprehensive plan. That helps us show that we are meeting the goals of the comp plan and we're really taking that community engagement aspect and really putting that to work into action to show those results. Helps us forecast the debt and cash needs and improves the transparency to the citizens of Bel Aire. It basically lays out our plan over the next 1 to 5 years for these projects that are next in line. That allows us time to go ahead and start those community engagement aspects regarding the whatever project it is, if it needs that. It also helps to avoid infrastructure failure surprises by constantly updating and reevaluating what we already have to know when it's going to need to be replaced. Most CIPs cover about 5 to 10 years. That first year is like the action step of the plan, right? That's what we're doing now. So we're getting ready. Those remaining years is like the planning horizon. What's next in line? What do we need to start working on now to be able to implement that in year 2 or year 3 or year 4? Key components is that project identification and scheduling, of course, the cost estimating and financing, prioritization, how we're going to score those and review those, and then also that annual review and update. We got to keep this thing current. It is a kind of a living document for those years 2 through 10. It's always going to be adjusted with the potential for adjustments every single year, but we'll always keep it up to date and fresh. Purpose and benefits. The main one there is the strategic planning. Like I said earlier, we'll pair it with those other master plans to make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes and coordinating with all the departments involved with the city. Fiscal responsibility, efficiency, transparency, kind of the same things. It lets us know what's coming up so we can get started today. So we're not waiting and starting to get a backlog of projects by starting late. And examples of CR capital improvements, infrastructure, facilities, large equipment, that would take several years to pay off. So how are the projects chosen? Now the comp plan has been approved, it will play a major part. Those identified projects will be added to a list, a bucket of projects, so to speak. We'll then evaluate and score those projects based on the comp plan or whatever criteria we want to set. Those will then be brought to City Council for review and selection for adoption of the plan to move forward. And I have on here, moving forward, all the project submissions will have some kind of comp plan element tied to it, the goals and value statements, and they'll be prioritized based on a scoring system. We'll start doing that once we really identify what elements we want to be scored on for those projects, or what we want to score those projects on. For the CIP plan approval, once all the projects have been scored and placed in the plan will be presented to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will ensure all listed projects conform to the city's comprehensive plan. So that is a statutory requirement. So once we develop and approve that CIP or have our draft of it, it'll go to Planning Commission. They'll make sure it aligns with our future land use and growth goals. Once they sign off on it, come to council for final approval. And then we'll do this on an annual basis, just moving forward. So here's kind of a snapshot of the CIP cycle. We'll identify projects, we'll evaluate them, we'll select them and prioritize them with council feedback and then scoring sheets. Then we'll jump into the financial analysis. How's it going to fit in our overall financial plan, our long-term range goals? Then we'll take those, put it into the CIP plan, and then put it up for review and adoption by the Planning Commission and the council. So that's kind of the life cycle of a CIP project. I'm sorry, this slide, a couple slides I added last minute today. So I was like, oh, I should probably talk about this today. So this is also another one of those. So this would be like an example CIP project sheet. It'll look a little cleaner than this, a little more prettier when we get it all into the CIP document. But what they'll include is the project scope, the justification, the location, usually a map of the project. The evaluation component, this one's just a hypothetical one. I just picked a scoring rubric of 50 points. It ties to the comp plan. It has a safety and security element. So it enhances the transportation safety along Rock Road from 45th to 53rd. Funded mandate and unfunded mandate, those are sometimes used as scoring criteria. If it's an unfunded mandate, we're obviously going to have to do that a lot sooner than a project that we just want to do, right? So sometimes those have a higher weighted to those projects. Then comes the funding sources. We'll identify the years and time frames those funding sources will be available. This one hypothetically would be financing with debt. So we would tent note it, get the preliminary engineering done, and then year 3, go to bond for this project. And then for the next 20 years, we pay an annual debt service amount. We'll also include operating impacts. A lot of CIP projects do have a operating impact to an operating budget. So we'll have to make sure we're taking those into account when we're doing the annual budget for each department, whether it's extra right-of-way maintenance for our public works team or striping for a road project later on. If it's going to need to be mill and overlaid in the next 10 years, we can go ahead and plan on doing that now, 10 years from now. Go ahead and incorporate that into either the streets master plan or the operating budget or however we want to do that. So it's really just setting that foundation for how we're moving forward, and we're already going to know what we're going to need to do later on.
Barry, is there anything in our system that we have that can help us with this type of planning and projects, meaning with Tyler? Do you set up projects in here, or does it?
Yeah. So with our new fixed asset management system, whenever a new water line, sewer line, storm drain, manhole, or whatever is built or constructed, it goes into our fixed asset management system. Well, in there we can put tags or flags 5-10 years from now. Hey, you need to check on this. Make sure you're up to date on what you need to get done maintenance wise on these. Once we do the maintenance, it also improves the asset, and then we can redo our depreciation and all that good stuff.
So I assume you are putting those flags in the system?
Slowly but surely, it's a lot.
Yeah, it would be a lot, but yeah.
Every subdivision, has water lines, service lines to the houses, the sewer mains, all those good things. All of our fleet, our desks, our computers, our buildings, our roofs, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
They're all becoming parts of that fixed asset management system. a big task. We're
That's
getting
the
it in there.
advantage of the computer. It can manage the data once you get it in there,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And it's fully customizable when it comes to reports. We can report on basically anything in the fixed asset system there. It'll show our operating spend on the assets. Like, it's good stuff. The last thing on the project sheet is the community impact. What kind of impact on the community is this project going to have? So for this, as an example, it'll enhance commuter safety and allows for increased traffic flow to and from K254 with this improvement. So those are the kind of things you'll see on the project sheet when they are submitted. And then we'll use that for our evaluation and scoring criteria.
This was just a hypothetical, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
literally just pulled some
Yeah.
numbers out of a
I
hat.
don't want somebody to come back and say, well, you plan to do this next year.
It is on the list of projects to do, but I was just trying to.
I understand
put up
that,
some
but
example.
we haven't made that decision that we're doing it next
Right.
year, right?
Right. So let's talk about funding sources for a second. Talk about cash. Cash has its positives and negatives. It's great for those lower cost projects that can be done pretty quick. If you want to save up cash for a major project like the Rock Road one, for example, that's going to take us a lot of time to save up $5 million, right? It also really impacts that intergenerational equity. Whatever we pay with cash, the burden falls on the taxpayers over the past 2 to 3 years for the time it took us to build up that cash. By utilizing debt and spreading that out over 20 years, that's spreading that cost out over 20 years and all the future and current taxpayers of Bel Aire over that same period of time. So it's just something to consider when we're talking about these projects. Grants funding, it's widely available. There's grants for all sorts of different things. There's just usually a higher administrative burden on staff to manage those, but it does keep costs much lower than a normal construction project, for example. Grant projects like all the WAMPO ones, they really like to have all that preliminary work done, and the engineering and design and everything. So when you're ready to go and get accepted, all you got is the construction part left, construction inspection, things like that. Debt, we use our general obligation bonds for our high cost projects, road construction, facilities, upgrades facilities, things like that. Special assessments, we can utilize those for assist in paying for large projects. We use these primarily for all of our subdivision projects. But if we want to dive into the policy arena, we can also talk about upsizing infrastructure, for example. If we have a subdivision we know is coming in north of town, and we know according to our comp plan, our land use is going to go farther north, it may behoove the city to go ahead and upsize that water line from 6 inches to 8 inches, and the city cover that extra cost. As the next development comes in, then we don't have to scramble and worry about, are we going to have enough water to get it to its next development? So just some things to talk about or think about as we plan out our growth over time with all the water and sewer infrastructure we're going to need. Alternative funding sources, the big one right now is the local option sales tax. You may hear it referred to as LOST. That's the acronym for it. Cities can levy their own to assist in financing city operations or projects if approved by a majority of its voters. Two purposes exist, the general purpose and special purpose. General purpose is for reducing reliance on property taxes or city operations or street maintenance, things like that. Special purpose is more of a specific identified project for like a rec center, for example. That would be a specific purpose of that sales tax use. We can implement a rate of a 3% total, 2% for general, 1% for special in those 0.05% range. So there's plenty of options of how much we could potentially do. And as of right now, the annual estimate for a 1% local sales tax here in Bel Aire is at $620,000 a year. There's also user fees and charges. These are mainly used for like parking upgrades. We don't really have a lot of parking areas, things like that. Toll roads, etc. So long range forecast, this is where really everything comes together and tells us a good story of how we want to move forward with things. It usually matches the same time frame as the CIP. Once the projects are prioritized, we'll insert them into this long range plan for final approval from council. So the next slide It's really hard to see up here. To give you a printout on your desk, this shows the 10-year general fund forecast as of right now. And this is really where the annual budgeting comes into play as well. Because I know over the past couple of years, we've been really focused on potentially dropping that mill levy year over year as much as we can to reduce that property tax liability, right? So as you see on the top row there, our mill levy, this is reduced to $0.5 every year over the next 10 years. Okay. Our assessed valuation growth on this chart, I did at 4%. There's some current legislation that could potentially cap it at 3%. Who knows what is going to happen with that, but I think 4% is a good number for estimating conservatively over time.
And that's pretty conservative as we develop new lands. However, we don't want to overshoot. We'd rather have something like this and present that.
Yeah. And also in here is our revenues projected out over the next 10 years. Most of them are pretty stagnant. We don't know how many permits are getting pulled every year. We have a good assumption, good idea, but most of those are stagnant over time. The expenditures, there's a 2.5% increase in personnel cost year over year. That's kind of how our pay structure works. Everyone gets a 2.5% step every year in their pay structure. And this includes no new FTEs throughout this entire period. Just starting, yep, it definitely will be a challenge, but like I said, I want to be extremely conservative in these estimates.
Barry, what year robots come to local government? I forgot.
No idea. No idea. Also includes 10% increase in medical insurance per year. That's been our average over the past several years, our increase in that area. 2% increase in commodities and contractuals per year. And this estimate here does include our debt service for 53rd Street and 45th Oliver to Woodlawn. Just so you'll see on that chart, those start in 2028 and they go through 2047. That debt service line there in the middle in 2028, you'll see where it jumps a little over 400,000. So each of those projects is about 220-ish in debt service that we're going to take on at that point in time. These projects are already in motion. Obviously, 53rd is done, 45th, the preliminary items are done. It should begin construction here. Not exactly sure when, but over the next year and a half, something like that, if I'm thinking correctly. And then it shows our property tax related land debt at the bottom there and our property tax related city debt. The debt service line also includes that 1.2 million in land debt. You can see that falls off. The last year that's on there is 2034. And so as 2035, you see our debt service drops to just over $1 million. So with the way this is structured with that reducing mill levy, our fund balance, we target 30%. We don't have to be at 30%. It just helps with the credit ratings and things like that. But as you see over time, that drops all the way down to 3% in 2034. When that land debt falls off, it jumps back up to 11%. So this is really going to tell us as we go through each annual budget cycle, how much can we really reduce property taxes at that point in time. Those are our main funding source for the city. It's over 50% of our revenues. And these long range forecasts, I love them because it really tells us a story of how we need to think proactively now, 5 and 10 years down the road, rather than tomorrow and just trying to reduce property tax as much as possible, essentially. Like it is there as a resource. We just need to utilize it responsibly, right? And this helps us do that over time.
So am I reading this right? You're saying in 2035, you're projecting reserves at 3%?
2034.
2034.
3% of our expenditures.
3%, not 30.
Three.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's probably not a good position to be in, but that's a long ways out, but that's not a good position to be in. Yeah.
As long as I'm just trying to provide that visual of how we need to start thinking now long term, because there's going to be other projects that come up that are going to need to get done. Do we alter how we fund these big projects? Do we pay cash for all the preliminary engineering and plannings and plan documents like that? I'm not a big fan of paying interest on engineering design for 20 years. Maybe we shift to that kind of formula, pay cash for the preliminary items up front and only bond the construction part of those.
And that's what we
Stuff like
did
that.
for 45th Street. We paid all the engineering cash, just to remind you.
What is 2034 jump to 2 million? And it just looks like it moves land debt to city debt.
The land debt just falls down there at the bottom. In 2034, that 1.1 million, that's the land debt. It falls off there.
2035 line at the bottom jumps to 2.17 million for the city debt and 0 for the land
Good
debt.
catch. It should be that 955 number right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just wonder if there was something about transferring funds.
This is a pretty big spreadsheet with all of our data on it. So I'm sure there's a little nuance here and there I'll need to go back and fix. But yeah, after that point, it should be that 955 number as of right now with those two projects. So just something to think about as we move forward, policy decisions, how we want to manage that, cash, debt, financings, mill levy, property taxes, everything all together all at once. So that brings us to how the CIP plan is kind of laid out. We will have a 10-year CIP plan. Like I said, year one is those action items. That's what's funded now. That's what will be started and constructed this year. That years 2 through 10 are kind of that planning horizon. So currently and historically, the city has used its CIP reserve fund as kind of the cash financing arm of the city. Every year we transfer $415,000 from our general fund to our CIP reserve fund, and we kind of take care of the smaller projects on an annual basis each year through that fund. It includes like our refreshing our existing parks, the sidewalk grant program, engineering architecture projects, those kind of things. During our 2026 budget season last year, we identified these projects for our CIP reserve fund. That's kind of what's slated for this year. Not saying we'll hit all those, but that's kind of what's available for moving forward. It just includes things like the HVAC system here at City Hall, architecture engineering study at City Hall. We are getting pretty full here, kind of running out of room. Refreshing.
And that one, if you remember, basically utilizing our space at City Hall, how can we do that? There's a big lobby downstairs that is a lot of space, and how can we utilize that better? And that's just the plan. So not any construction in 2026, but having someone look at it that knows more than Barry and I about architecture and engineering.
I built a house out of popsicle sticks with my son the other day, but I wouldn't trust me for any building renovations.
Ted, on that one, I would encourage you to, and I don't know if you've already visited with somebody, but to think more than just remodeling the lobby, but like what would a future expansion look like if PD were to move out? Like, I would just encourage them to look at it a little bit more holistically and not just focused on that one thing. If you can, I don't know what that design study is going to cost, if that 50,000 is going to cover much, but.
Is this list everything that's planned for 26?
It's everything that was included in there for 26. Yes, we won't necessarily do 100% of these things, but they're basically at the approval for funding step.
Okay.
So whenever we do get to one of these items, we'd bring it before council, make sure everything is good to go, get your sign off and approval, and then we'll move forward with it moving there. So
One thing I don't see on this list is several weeks ago, we had that presentation about our sewage system and how it's deteriorating. Is that on a different list?
yep, that'll be
Okay.
on a different list. So water and sewer are going to each have their own CIP plan essentially
Separate
for those
funds.
projects.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
So for 2026, what you're its own chemical line in our sewer budget that you'll hear about when we do that.
Yeah, I should clarify. These are all basically general fund funded items. All the water and sewer, they got their separate revenue streams, so they'll use those for their projects, their maintenance projects. For 2027 through 2035, these were just some of the other items we had listed that could be funded with cash over that time period. None of these have been selected or given the green light to even consider moving forward with, but they're in the price range where we could handle paying cash for these items.
And the big one there is we're thinking after Woodlawn's done and 45th, that Bel Aire Park would be a great opportunity to give that a facelift. That whole corner would be brand new. It'd be beautiful.
And Ted, that also is one of the ones that was a part of the last master plan that we did. So would make sense. Obviously that needs to be designed. That was just conceptual, but I agree. It would make sense to move that one forward maybe sooner than later.
So here's a list of the bigger projects that would more than likely consider some kind of debt financing for these projects. Police station new addition, rec master plan implementation and construction. We've been talking about the rec center for a while. And then here's every project we have submitted within WAMPO. I think only a few of these have been chosen for funding so far, but they're also in the project identification stage of WAMPO. They've been put in the bucket. And then the WAMPO has the TAC and TPB committees that then select projects later on, correct?
Well, there's actually a committee that reviews the projects first,
Gotcha.
project selection committee. So that date, we have to have those projects submitted to them by March 6th.
Mm-hmm.
So
We got a future discussion next Tuesday on that. But
so that's the due date to get it considered in the project selection committee. Most projects don't make it out of there.
Right.
Okay.
and we might spend a little time just kind of discussing this slide. This would be our big projects and where priorities matter. The biggest unknown that Barry and I keep going back and forth on is the K254 improvements, what that's going to look like in the next 5 years. You know, as much as we'd love for KDOT to just come and build whatever they want, it is required a local share, much like an 80-20 split like we have with WAMPO. However, we have a lot of neighbors. We have a lot of help in that local share. We also have some land dedicated to the project we can use as an in-kind donation. However, not sure if we're going to get off scot-free with just our land donation. So that's the most difficult number to predict. And, you know, as we go through, last week we had a great discussion, 2 great discussions on just the design element of what's going to in place. And we really haven't touched, you know, what we're going to do, the ancillary side of, Rock, Webb, Greenwich, if we have to do some improvements along that first mile off the interchange or the overpass, what that's going to come about. So we threw $5 million in just as a spot. Don't hold to that number. We just figured, it's probably going to be in the millions and wanted to get prepared for that. The other thing is, you know, since 2023, I think Rock Road from 45th from 45th to 53rd was kind of our top priority for the next major reconstruction of an arterial. I think that's still in place, but I'm welcome to any discussion on that particular street project. And I think if we wanted to discuss, we can discuss street projects first, and then we can go on to other areas.
Ted, I'll kick us off by seconding your thought on 254. It's really hard to know what to expect there, and I really don't see any construction occurring probably until 2030 or later, because they've already indicated to us that it does not have construction funding, and it's going to be in the next transportation bill, hopefully, that they pass for another 10-year program. But I think it's wise for us to be thinking ahead on that. And I'm also really hopeful, and I know Mayor's really hopeful, and we've voiced that we'd really like to see the 53rd Street local roads, and like you said, Webb and Greenwich and Rock probably as well, considered in that planning. So hopes that we can partner with KDOT that some of those improvements may be a part of or adjacent KDOT projects that could help both what we need done as a CIP, but also help KDOT with their project design and their project delivery, and then our match. So hopefully that's a lot of moving parts, but the hope is that we can keep pushing for that so that can be a benefit to them and to us as we move forward. But yeah, that is a really hard one to wrestle with, but I suspect that the construction won't be as immediate as we hope, but I could be wrong. It's just, they've been signaling pretty strong that it's not funded. It's not in this 10-year program, which tells you that it's 2030 and beyond. But we'll keep pushing. Obviously, things can change. But yeah, that's my thought on that. And then as far as Rock Road, I know that road is very narrow, and I think a lot of citizens have given me feedback just since I've been on council. Obviously, development along the east side of Bel Aire contributes a little bit to traffic along 53rd and Rock. Something has to be done with that road. It does feel like, I mean, obviously we're probably going to do some sort of a maintenance project potentially in the next year or two, but I would second the thought that that's probably still, behind 45th, and fixing Woodlawn and 45th is probably one of our, maybe not the top, but one of our top priorities.
I'm going to suggest that it be very top because it's already failing. It's already showing
Right.
lots of signs of failure, and we're going to end up with another situation what we had there at 45th, just west of Woodlawn, if we don't give it some attention pretty soon.
I would also say that on that project, I'd like to see us put in sidewalk at a minimum. I know that may be really difficult to do if we're just doing a repaving project, but I think it would be really, really smart for us to figure out a way to make that work. Because I know our citizens want that access along 45th to Rock and then along Rock, and they do not have that right now. And there's no shoulder, so there's really no way to go up that road on a bike safely either. So I would say that too that road's probably a priority, but also making it more than just repaving, making it not necessarily an expansion. I don't think we're going to do a 3-lane project. I don't know that that's necessary, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I see a lot of people walking up and down Rock from the apartments, especially just walking through the ditch. And I mean, traffic's fast enough there that's really concerning as far as just priority wise.
I'm glad they're walking in the ditch and not on the roadbed. But I get what you're saying. Yes. Yeah.
The other thing with our growth, and Barry added it, really got to look at our intersections. And we had a discussion about it, but I think 53rd and Webb's probably going to need some sort of mass, big intersection sooner rather than later. And that's something we're looking at. The KDOT's got an economic development grant. Barry was part of that in his former position, but a lot of these off grants, as Barry mentioned, creates a lot of administrative burden on staff. So as we plan for the future, we also got to plan for staffing levels to accept that free money. Not that we're going to have to hire a whole brand new position. It's just, how can I, as the city manager, say, all right, Barry, you attack this grant. What do you need to backfill? Those sort of shifting of responsibilities is something that I constantly struggle with as we, even the ERP system upgrade that took a 1.5 years of Barry's life away from me. I'm glad to have you back, Barry, because now we get to do some of this stuff. This is kind of what I envisioned when we worked, but we had to go full forward with the ERP system upgrade. But you can see how just adding one new initiative can affect the whole organization as a whole. But I'm glad we did that project. I just want to keep that in your mind too as we start to look at different projects.
The 50, I assume this is a typo. It says 54th and Webb. I assume it's 53rd and Webb. Is that
Yeah, I think I
correct?
just drug that cell down and added one to it and then retyped it. It's a
Yeah, I
workshop,
get
it's
it.
not an official meeting.
Sorry,
so it's
no-
okay.
no
Just
worries.
take it.
Excel
So
can't
it says
predict what you want it to do.
$500,000. It says $500,000. That is not going to do anything to that intersection that's meaningful. Okay. if you're not looking at $1 to $2 million, you're not going to do anything meaningful to that intersection.
So these would be the city portion, that 20%.
Okay,
So
that's very good. So if you can get a grant to cover the rest of it,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's just, unfortunately, traffic lights are $1 million a set, you know.
Very expensive.
One thing I'll caution, and to kind of tag on to what you just said there, one thing I'd caution is that are these intersections really a great fit for going through this whole WAMPO process? I mean, we know how long that takes. We know the impact it had on us. We know it's a KDOT project. I would really question if that's the best use of our time, our energy, our money, or if we ought to just get really focused on the intersection that we want to pick, whatever that priority is, and just cash fund that and do it as a city project. Because that intersection isn't going to wait for 4 or 5 years. That intersection needs to be done like today. So I would really focus on maybe us not relying so heavily on WAMPO. And I know that's part of this discussion is what is our priorities as a city, because I don't feel like those two projects in particular, and even maybe 53rd, I forgot to mention this after the discussion or comment on Rock, 53rd between Woodlawn and even Webb isn't great. I mean, we've talked about how we had to replace 53rd. I mean, there's parts of 53rd right now that are also getting to the point of falling apart. And I would even include parts of the paving, the concrete paving that's near Webb. There's lots of distress on that paving. And I think it's just because of the rapid development that's occurred. That road's getting 10 years old now. So I don't know. That's another project in my mind I didn't even mention, and I don't know if it's on that list, but 53rd Street isn't going to wait for the KDOT project that happens in 2035 or whatever date they pick. So I know we're not going to do a full reconstruction project because we're not going to want to spend that kind of money, especially given that we may end up expanding it to 3-lane and it may be a part of a bigger KDOT project. But thinking along the lines of what we did on 53rd from Oliver to Woodlawn, we're going to probably have to do something. I just don't know if it's probably like $1 million to $2 million project, not a $10-15 million project. But I don't know if 53rd's even on that list and those two stretches. But
And Barry, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the EcoDevo grant is straight from KDOT, not through WAMPO, or is it through WAMPO?
I think that one's straight from KDOT.
Straight from KDOT, because I think
so the process may be a little bit shortcutted.
yeah, and the timing is important too, because they want to know how many jobs will be added. So it's a process I'm just now learning about. But just to answer your question, we're trying not to wait for WAMPO on that intersection. We're trying but still get a little help with the extraordinary cost.
Maybe cabbage on to just the
Exactly.
growth in sunflower.
And
Yeah,
with all the wins we're getting in
sure.
sunflower, I'd rather use those to turn the attention of KDOT towards
Yeah,
us.
just
that's
so
good
you
to
know, though they will pop up on the WAMPO list. The $31,000 that we got for the safety improvements, it popped up on the list today. So
Just because they covered that area.
yeah, it's a funny game, but yeah, they take credit for something they really didn't do anything with, right?
Well, still I like that we're thinking along those lines, but also I just feel like at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to wait on grants for some of these. We're just going to have to decide as a council that that's a priority, and we're going to have to elevate it, and we're going to have to just fund it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that the WAMPO system is a good thing anyway. We've seen it on a couple of projects. The costs just escalate when you go through all the requirements of KDOT and US DOT. And we're not the only ones that have experienced this. I've been told this about other cities as well, that they've seen costs double because they went through that process. And they're just like, well, maybe that's not so smart. I mean, we did 53rd for under $3 million a mile. Okay. And it's a 3-lane. Okay. But the sidewalk doubled in price on us when we went to the KDOT grant funding. Like, why? That doesn't make sense to me. So
Ted, will you remind me, last month's workshop, the scope of your traffic study are just those limited intersections we talked about, or is it broader than that? that you said, that you mentioned you approved?
So I'm supposed to get an update on that. It was just a couple of intersections. I can't quite remember, but we're going to utilize data from the K254 study that's going on right now. So we should be able to triangulate a lot of numbers with studies. We're trying to keep costs down yet have the information we want. So we're strategically doing it. I know Ann and Tim, who helped present from PEC, are working on that project right now.
Remind me again on these numbers. So say Rock Road 45th to 53rd is 5 million. City costs, does that mean it really costs 20 million for the 80-20 split?
Well, our total city cost is also going to include the preliminary engineering and
Okay.
design and all that stuff. So maybe $1 million of that is the preliminary engineering, and then the $4 million is the construction part.
So it's still a $15-16 million construction. So we're estimating on all those $5
Could
million
be.
dollars.
If you're going to include storm sewer and all that stuff, it really starts to get
So
up there.
what if we just did like we did with 53rd
Right, that'd be a
and
full
use
three
the
lane.
use the existing ditches system and go 3-lane, or if 3-lane's not really what we need, I don't know. I'm not sure 3-lane's needed there, but we would need some left turn lanes if we didn't do 3-lane. But maybe we should think about that and see what does that do for us, because maybe we would be smarter to just do that and execute quicker than wait till some funding comes available in WAMPO and we double the cost.
I would tend to agree with that. I don't think that's going to work in every case, but in the case where we know, okay, Rock is not going to be a blown up development area. We kind of know what it is. It feels like it would be better for us to take the tact of, let's get a 2-lane with shoulders and maybe squeeze in a sidewalk or a path or something, instead of spending the money to do a full reconstruction at 3-lane. I don't think that the traffic count, you probably can ask the engineers, they probably have the traffic count from Willow Bend or some previous project. My guess is the traffic count isn't high, and we probably don't have a lot of reason to project that it's going to go up a ton. So I would agree with that there's going to be stretches of roads that we just know kind of what they are, and we know that there's not significant development coming on them or around them, and it might make sense to save money on those stretches and spend it in other places that we know I need a 3-lane or an advanced underground storm system. We can't have it all. We know that we got limited budget. So we do. That's a way of prioritizing, is deciding that stretch is just kind of what it is. We're just going to upgrade it to a 2-lane with shoulders. It's going to be a new paved. People are going to love that. They don't, so I think that's a good point.
Well, 53rd is a 3-lane, and everybody that I've talked with really likes it, except they just haven't gotten used to that's just a 2-way stop. But I don't know why that is. It's always been that, but for some reason we keep getting people that say, "Well, we thought it was a 4-way stop," and then they get crashes. But
But you were saying doubling the cost. It's tripling the cost.
oh yeah,
If you're-
some of it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
There's a lot of
pretty
factors, right?
crazy.
The underground
Right.
work, the
Right.
right of way acquisition. There's a lot of things that stack on top,
Right.
but it really is a need. Do you really need it? It'd be nice, right? If you had
Right.
unlimited
Right.
funds, yeah, let's go build a 3-lane, but we don't have that, right? So you
Right.
have to prioritize. And I think everybody probably in the community recognizes that if we can stretch our dollars further and make smarter decisions like that we can do more projects, and instead of just making every project a 3-lane with storm drain. We don't have to do that now, but like I said, not every project you'll have that choice. I mean, I think
So-
Webb's a good example, right? That intersection, we don't really have a choice. Eventually, it's just going to need a nice intersection with probably a signal, and we're kind of getting forced into that because of the development pattern and the growth.
I'll tell you another thing another contractor suggested to me, and I've only suggested it before. I've never pushed it, but you take the ditches, you do paved ditches to make them more stable if you need to do that. That's been done at Mays Road, I think it is, along about 37th Street. If you go out there and look along there, Wichita did paved ditches there along there. Now they had the right of way to do it. So if you have the right of way, maybe that makes sense.
So
And I don't
sometimes-
know if we need to, but something to think about.
Sometimes what they do is, either they do a bottom of paving, or they'll do what they call a 3-sided box, which basically instead of having an underground box, they'll have walls and a bottom, and it's
Mhm.
just a ditch, but it allows you to grow the width of the road without relocating the storm drain. You just leave it in the ditch. It's just a different way. I don't know that that would be a great solution for rock, but
I'm not saying
we
it
might not
is,
need
but
that much
something
room.
to think about. Something to say, this might be an option on the table to think about.
And it also could be a half measure too. On some projects, some parts of it might make sense to put underground storm drain, but you don't need to do a big box and do the whole thing underground. There might be select areas where you might have to do it to add the bike path or the sidewalk. You're not going to probably get away from doing no underground, but maybe you could limit it like a lot, get it down to 20% of the project, and that would still save a significant amount. So,
I think the storm boxes on Woodlawn were $800 a foot.
yeah, it depends
You
on
go for a full mile. That's
depends
a
on the
lot of
size,
bucks.
depends on a lot of factors, but they can get expensive.
If we leave the ditches, is there room to put in a sidewalk? I know that's a major priority of that project.
I think that
That's what you have to look at.
I think that it would be an interesting thing to figure out. I think that depending on what side you'd want to put it on, there could be it could be difficult, but I think you could probably figure it out. We probably won't put it on both sides based on the
Bel Aire's only on one side for about half of that.
right. The city of Wichita is on the east side for
Yep.
half mile or so.
Yep, that's right. Well, you can do it. It's,
Well, it unfortunately may be a situation where it works on one side for half of it, and then you got to cross just because of the way it's laid out. But our engineers can figure that out for sure. I mean, it's just a matter of cost too, how you go about doing it. But I don't know. Is there anything on this list that, other than what I mentioned with 53rd, that we feel like is missing? I'm just kind of looking at the list, seeing if there's a major road that we're leaving off. Yep, Oliver, Woodlawn. And
We pretty short because we tried to keep it to the 10-year forecast a little bit. We can expand it. Also, because of the K254 stuff, a lot of it's south of 53rd.
some of it's kind of combined.
Yeah.
well, I'm just curious. You said here 45th Woodlawn to Rock, $5 million. Would a mill and overlay work on that one instead of a full reconstruction? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and
just
that
something to think
kind of
about.
goes into, what do we want to utilize with our street?
Right.
Because the 5-year forecast also has the
The
$1 million
maintenance.
for street maintenance a year. And that's kind of why we put on Webb 45th to 53rd mill and overlay. We know it's a 4-lane road. That's going to be about the whole
Right,
expense.
right,
Do we
right.
want to throw some of these big mill and overlay projects in the CIP because we know we don't want to use the full $1 million in the budget year to, we're sacrificing a lot of other streets by doing that. And I think that's wise to do like a Webb. That's a good question, Mayor Minaj.
Well, so one of the things on that, to cabbage onto that, is the discussion we had last year about when we do the mill and overlay in that section this year. I think that's on the schedule. The idea of converting that to a 3-lane. Now that gets rid of, restriping.
Can't do a mill and overlay and make it 3-lane.
No, mill and overlay in this regard, Mayor, you might remember the discussion. The width of that road is wide. It's wide. It's got a wide paved shoulder. We have a sidewalk on one side, and there is the possibility, they did core samples, of restriping that so that you have one northbound, one southbound, and you have a middle lane for left turns between there.
You're talking
So it's not a
Woodlawn.
full
You're talking
3-lane
Woodlawn.
Woodlawn.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, what I was cabbaging on is that Woodlawn expansion, 45th to 53rd. To me, if we feel really strongly after we do the mill and overlay, the cores, we do end up striping it. We're essentially keeping it a rural section. We're keeping the ditches. We're restriping it just to use the additional width of the paving to help with left turn movements. And that really does give us a Woodlawn expansion in a little bit of a cheaper, more efficient way. Won't get us by forever, but maybe gets us by for 10 years. And maybe that kicks that expansion project further down the priority list because of that. It just depends on if that all works out. I know we were still waiting on some information back from PEC, but I think that could help with sort of managing the CIP if you could push that into further out.
When are we going to see PEC and go out for bid for our $1 million?
Bids are tomorrow. At
Okay.
2:00 bids will be taken, and we'll see all the prices and everything March 3rd.
Okay, great.
Is that for the road maintenance? The
Yes,
whole thing?
yeah,
Okay.
yep.
I wasn't sure. That's already been being bid out. Good.
So just a timing on that, are we looking at maybe moving the schedule up that for 2027 and doing that bid letting or in the fall instead of waiting until the spring?
Certainly can. We always try stars as early as we can to get competitive prices, but I can push
Well,
them.
the logic is as Councilmember Dean has said before, they like to book the stuff and usually you get a more competitive price because when they look at it in the fall, because now they book that. But when you come to the spring, they've already got a lot of the work already booked for the year. So now it's like, okay, where can I fit this in, kind of a thing. So.
Yeah, everybody's busy, and I do think that usually by the end of the year, most contractors have their next year's backlog already pretty full, especially when there's as many projects as there are now. Obviously, that changes when the economy goes south and there's less projects, but
Yeah.
the economy's been pretty good for building projects as of the last 4 or 5 years. So that's generally been the case for most contractors. But no, it'll be good to see that because that we can start getting that project going earlier in the year.
Did you get any priority there?
No, actually, a lot of great feedback, kind of thinking in my brain how to organize some of these projects based on the elements that they have, kind of how they tie out to our goals and our comp plan, actually, with the transportation and the Pine and bike plan elements. Have those projects will be more adept for WAMPO projects? Are they, and the needs timeframe there, does it need to be done now, next year, year after that? How can we kind of split up our annual streets funding, supplement it with some stormwater funds for the stormwater element of the street improvement? It does provide the runoff, so we can use stormwater funding for those as well, which also makes me think about stormwater fees. And if we need to review that, maybe update those fees. Any kind of supplemental, taking some of the streets funding, putting it back year over year, maybe 10 note a project up front, pay the 10 note off after 3 years with those cash savings that we saved up over the next 3 years. There's all certain ways we can think about on these financing mechanisms and how to do that. So
Another thing that made me think about it as you kind of presented was you mentioned, and it was a great question about the water or sewer fund having its own, finance or its own funding.
Right.
And having its own CIP plan as a part of that. I kind of tend to think about that way a little bit now too, is with our general fund, because we have street projects, we have road maintenance, street maintenance, which is a separate thing from street construction. We have the facilities as you've listed. To me, rec, parks, and paths are probably a separate bucket, right? And I feel like if you don't look at it in categories or have separate CIPs for each bucket, you start to never do some of them never get touched.
Yep.
And I hate that, right? You would like to be able to, obviously we're going to focus on the road, and the road maintenance are probably always going to be our top ones, but
right.
You'd like to be picking off 1 or 2 of those other projects every year or 2, even if there are smaller, just so that you're continuing to work that plan. So as far as criteria goes, I guess one of my feedbacks would be somehow categorizing our CIP, or maybe even getting more granular with the CIP to those other major focuses. And those kind of line up with the comp plan too. So maybe that's the answer, is each comp plan deal has its own list. I don't know.
So yeah, this is kind of a snapshot of just the major projects, but
Right.
within the overall sheet, there is a Parks and Rec, PD, Public Works,
Right.
Water,
All
Sewer,
the other
Admin, all the
buckets.
departments in there. But then, yeah, when we align those with the comp plan, then we can show what percentage of funding is going to what goal of our comp plan, right? And then however you guys want to set that priority of which one gets the most funding down to the least, that's all up to you. But we can present the data and show you anything. This is the fun part. There's so many possibilities. It's just trying to narrow it down and pick what's best for the overall community. That's the hard part.
It's nice to be organized though, because then it makes making decisions a lot easier.
It does. And utilizing those plans rather than just letting them sit on a shelf, so much better. But as I mentioned earlier, this just makes us more efficient over time as we get those projects picked out. We can go and start those timelines earlier and earlier and just keep a constant move down this plan moving forward. One last thing I did want to touch on was I went ahead and had our financial advisors put together a pro forma on the sales tax revenue for that $620,000 a year on a 15-year bond or a 20-year bond. The highlighted numbers at the bottom, that's how much it would generate for projects itself. So just something to keep in mind. I know other cities utilize the sales tax a lot for street improvements themselves. So this could add another element to that. Just options to consider.
Just from what I'm hearing, the buzz on the Wichita sales tax thing that they're doing right now, you got to put some very well-defined guardrails on any kind of a project you do like this, if you have any hope of getting it passed. I'm not saying it'll pass even at that, but I think that is a big issue they're dealing with right now. They didn't put them in there, and now they're saying, oh well, maybe we should do that, and it may be too late. So
It makes a
but
huge difference.
that's up to them.
Yeah, personally, I think that their biggest flaw is bundling so much stuff together. And
Well, it could be.
I think if we ever did a sales tax, I'll just speak for myself. I won't speak for the entire council, but I would believe in putting it to the ballot if we felt like we had a project, a very specific project, like a rec rebuild or parks initiative or something very specific that we had to spend the money on. And that was a value for the entire community. And that was something that the council couldn't take away, right? Because
Yeah.
right now, if we just give a property tax reduction, there's nothing
Yeah,
guaranteeing
it's not going to happen.
the
Yeah.
future council.
Right.
I'm stating what everybody needs to hear out loud. There's no guarantee that if we gave a property tax reduction with sales tax, that the next council would just jack it up. So I would not be in support of any measure that tied sales tax to property tax. I think that's a mistake.
Mhm.
And I think we should just do what we're supposed to be doing as a city council people and make the tough decisions about how we're going to spend the tax dollars or not. And then the sales tax initiative, in my opinion, we'd have to really vet that out, and we'd have to have a really good, solid vision to sell to the community, to have the community decide, do we want to support that investment or not, and then put it to the voters to decide. But I think it's good to have this data. I mean, especially when you start looking at the 10-year forecast of us taking our revenue balance down to 3%. That's pretty scary when you're looking at all the costs that you've obviously made a ton of assumptions on what costs are going up and stuff. But it starts to really make you wonder, just even in a few years, we start getting down to 20 and then 15 and 10. Something's got to give. We either got to stop. We either got to cut a lot of expenses, which is something you can do, but it's tough, or you got to find out how to raise more revenue. And nobody's excited about raising property taxes. So I'm glad that you presented the sales tax in this piece, because it's something to chew on for sure.
Barry, I'm curious about what's with the 0.5% mill levy reduction assumption?
I just put that in there over the last couple of budget cycles. It's kind of been kind of the council's goal over time to slowly reduce that property tax levy over time. So just maintaining that goal over this period. Just wanted to present it. And
How
Give
deep
you
do
a
we
picture.
how deep do we wind up getting in our reserves if we just keep it where it is?
I got like 10 different scenarios.
Okay.
So and that brings me back to the whole budget discussion. What is
It
going
would
to
be
be
nice
our
to see
goal?
that.
What's going to be our priority in regards to property taxes? Is it going to be keep them where they need to be to fund these projects? Is it going to be reduce them, keep them steady, and then do whatever we can do? I mean, there's multiple options. I just need the feedback from council to kind of put those scenarios together.
Also, Barry, it would be nice to see the IRBs. I know I don't know how many are going to fall off over this 10 years, but it might be nice to see a line that shows us what that offset could be, because then we could kind of see how that would play with just a half mil lowering or whatever.
I have that.
I assumed you baked
Trying
that
to
into
get
this plan, did you not?
Do what?
I assumed you baked those IRBs that are coming back on the books into this plan, did you not?
It a little bit, but not the exact
Okay.
total.
All right.
I mean, to me, it'd be nice to see it right there under mill levy, maybe IRB mill levy, potential future reduction from
Oh, that's
IRBs,
a good
just
point.
to see what the total dollars and total mill equivalent estimate would be, because we might be, if you bake that in, maybe we're fine, or maybe we're not.
I think the most that was going to come back on was just over 1 mil at one point over the same period. But those kind of ebb and flow because like what's being built now is on the tax roll. Once it hits 100% built, then we're going to lose 30 grand next year in our what we collected this year, right? So it's going to go up and down with those IRBs.
It's going to be interesting what the legislation's doing. So Thursday, there's a hearing on a bill that limits your ad valorem tax by 3% increase per year without going to an election. I'm going to testify on that bill on Thursday, but don't know what will happen with that. But to me, that's probably, of all the different varieties of stuff they have in the legislature, that's probably the one that makes the most sense. They've got one constitutional amendment limits the growth of assessed values by 3%. That one's, you got winners and losers, so Jim Howell did an estimate said of 161,000 properties in Sedgwick County, 85,000 will see a tax increase, where 76,000 will see a tax decrease. So somebody's going to pay for the other people's property tax decrease. That's not a good thing. But we don't know where it's going to go. But we may end up going through a budget exercise and then find out we got to tweak it because of this or that by the end of the session.
Well, and I'll say too, that takes away our home rule. Like we're not able to make local decisions, like priorities at Bel Aire.
They're going to take it away from us.
If
I guarantee you they will take it away from us. There's just no question about it. Okay. Because they've gotten so much flack about property taxes just out of control.
Sure.
Yeah. It's going to happen.
I was just going to make a couple of quick comments. I don't think there's any scenario where we should bring the reserves down to 3%. I think that would be crazy. So I want to point out we are quite competitive. We have made significant strides on our mill levy.
Yes.
I can't remember where we rank, but we're right up there for very competitive mill levies. So I like the idea of kind of having a bit of a trough, and then it looks like land debt falling off is what allows us to get back out of that. But there's no scenario where we should have reserves should be at 30% and they're at 3%. And then I was going to comment on the Bel Aire potential for a sales tax. I'm not wild about it, but I've always been shocked how much revenue we could get from it. And to echo Councilmember Dean, just if it was specific, I looked back in 2014, Wichita had their last sales tax vote and it failed pretty badly. But Bel Aire also had a sales tax vote that year as well. And it was a 55-44 split. It failed as well, but it was kind of a hodgepodge plan back then. So I think it's something that we should consider. But it, like you said, it's going to have to be very clear, very targeted, and with appropriate guardrails for future councils and a good sunset. So those are just a couple of my comments. I like the idea of bringing the mill levy down, a little bit again, maybe for the next year or two, but it's, we can't be irresponsible about it. So that's all I was going to say.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that legislation for the hearing on Thursday. The thing that I dislike most about it is we would have to go to an election this year for the 2028 budget. As you see from the chart, that's when that debt service hits for the street projects. If that election were to fail, we couldn't exceed that cap to pay that debt service for 53rd and 45th.
That's one of the issues I'm going to make to them is don't do that.
If that would happen, we'd have to cut 400 grand from the budget to pay our debt. Right.
Another thing about one of the bills, I don't know which one. I've read both of them and I'm confusing the
There's
ones.
3 or 4 of them.
The one that caps the assessed value also does not apply to the state or school districts.
Correct.
School districts amount to 40 to 60%, depending on where you live. That's the
Yeah.
significant property tax bill, not cities and county.
Yeah.
There is so much wrong with that.
Yeah. there is.
That line
You're
in
absolutely right.
itself is a problem because it's not going to effectively do what they want it to do anyway, right out of the gate.
That's House Bill 2745,
And so-
and that's the one I'm testifying on. And
Just
you're
that line
absolutely right.
itself.
That is, I ain't going to tell them. If you don't
Yeah.
include the schools in it,
Won't have any
you
impact.
will you'll lose all the momentum that you're trying to gain here because half the property taxes is for schools. So they got to be they got to be playing the same field that we are. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
The other thing to consider is, it's easy to say 4% growth, but and Barry will work. We'll try to capture just the new construction growth as well. It'd be like the IRB. Like I said, I've been here for a while, and it just seems like the last few years, PD, everyone's really felt the growth. You say, okay, we add 100 houses here or there, but it seemed like last year, just everyone felt the growth all at once. So that's an important statistic because you can say a straight line 4% thinking, oh, my house is going to appreciate 4% a year. That sounds right. But for the city's perspective, yes, your house appreciated 3-4% a year, but we grew 15%. That other 11% is from new construction that we have to serve. So that's one thing that we'll try to keep in mind, that it's really hard doing forecasts. I've done them before. And I think if you look at Wichita's forecasts, they're in the black. Their reserves are completely gone and then some 10 years out or 15 years out. But like Barry said, it's important to just keep our eye on this every year, look at it, update it as we can, and refine it so that we can make the best decision for this community we can.
So what else did you want to show us?
That's all I got.
That's all you got. Huh?
So, no, appreciate all the good feedback. And I think Ted and I will take that into consideration when we're kind of putting this plan together and these projects, and we'll bring them back to you. Hopefully we have some good.
The ranking workshop is going to be probably more fun for you guys, but we have to have this workshop in order to get to the ranking workshop.
Okay. So did this include the CIP? That I know you had some CIP stuff in there, but was there other CIP stuff you're going to talk about, or is this it?
No, that was it.
This is it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if there's nothing else to talk about, we can all go home. Okay. And we'll see everybody next week for an interesting open meeting on bike paths and then it's Mardi Gras. So we'll have a king cake here. And Tyler, you can't win again this year. You won last year. So, but hopefully we can get that done. All right. So everybody have a good week, and we will see you next Tuesday, if not before.